Welcome and settle in for another journey into the quiet corners of history. Tonight, we're traveling back in time, not to a grand battle or a royal court, but to a simple, flickering hearth in colonial America. The air outside is crisp, the leaves have fallen, and a harvest moon hangs in the inky sky. We're here to discover what the night we now call Halloween might have looked like for the early colonists. So, find a comfortable position, let your eyes gently close, and allow the sounds of the past to guide you toward a peaceful rest. Our story begins not with jack-o'-lanterns and trick-or-treating, but with ancient traditions carried across the Atlantic. The roots of Halloween stretch back to the Celtic festival of Samhain. For the people of Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, this was a time of immense significance. It marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the darker half of the year. They believed that on the night of October 31st, the veil between our world and the spirit world was at its thinnest. This allowed spirits of the departed to walk the earth once more. To welcome benevolent ancestral spirits, they would set places for them at the dinner table. To ward off malevolent ones, people would light bonfires and sometimes wear costumes and masks, disguising themselves to confuse any spirits with ill intent. When these Celtic immigrants, particularly the Irish and Scottish, began arriving in America, they brought these traditions with them. However, in the rigid and devout world of the early New England colonies, dominated by Puritan beliefs, such practices were met with stern disapproval. The Puritans viewed these old-world customs as pagan and superstitious, directly conflicting with their strict religious doctrines. For them, the world was a serious place, a battleground between good and evil, with no room for what they saw as frivolous or demonic celebrations. Any hint of magic, divination, or communication with spirits was strictly forbidden. In the world of the Puritans, there was no Halloween. But as we move southward into the colonies of Virginia, Maryland, and the Carolinas, the cultural landscape softens. Here, a more diverse mix of European settlers, including English Anglicans, Germans, and others, created a society that was generally more relaxed about social gatherings and festivities. While they didn't celebrate Halloween as we know it, they did have play parties. These were community events celebrating the end of the harvest. Families and neighbors would gather to share food, sing, dance, and most interestingly tell ghost stories. The flickering firelight would cast long, dancing shadows on the walls as elders recounted tales of local apparitions and strange happenings in the deep, dark woods that surrounded them. It was also at these gatherings that a form of fortune-telling, particularly for young, unmarried people, became popular. These practices were echoes of the old divination rituals of Samhain, repackaged as light-hearted party games. One popular game involved apples. A young woman might try to peel an apple in one continuous strip. If she succeeded, she would throw the peel over her shoulder. The shape it formed on the ground was believed to represent the initial of her future husband. Another game, bobbing for apples, also had a matchmaking element. Each apple might be assigned to a potential suitor, and the first apple a young woman could catch with her teeth would signify her match. These games, though seemingly innocent, were a subtle link to the ancient belief that this time of year held a special power for glimpsing the future. As the 18th century progressed, the colonies grew and prospered. The strictures of the early Puritans began to loosen, even in New England. A new American identity was beginning to form, one that blended a variety of European traditions. Ghost stories became a popular form of entertainment. People would huddle close to the hearth, listening to tales of local legends, spectral figures seen on lonely roads, or the rattling chains of a ghost said to haunt a nearby inn. These stories served not just as entertainment, but as a way for communities to process their fears of the unknown, the vast wilderness, and the very real dangers of colonial life. They were a shared cultural experience, whispered in the dark of a long autumn night. It wasn't until the great wave of Irish immigration in the mid-19th century, following the potato famine, that the traditions we more closely associate with Halloween truly began to take root in American soil. Millions of Irish immigrants brought with them their rich folklore and their specific customs for All Hallows Eve. They brought the practice of carving not pumpkins, which were a new world crop, but turnips and potatoes, creating jack-o'-lanterns with ghoulish faces to scare away wandering spirits. They also brought the tradition of guising, where people would go from door to door in costume, reciting verses or performing tricks in exchange for food or drink. This was the direct ancestor of our modern trick-or-treating. As these Irish customs mingled with the existing English and German harvest traditions, a uniquely American version of Halloween began to emerge. Neighbors started to see the fun in these activities. The community play parties of the colonial era slowly transformed. The ghost stories, the fortune-telling games with apples, and the new practice of guising all began to merge. Over time, the celebration became less about ancient spirits and more about community fun, especially for children. It was a slow, quiet evolution taking place in towns and villages across the expanding nation. Imagine a late colonial evening. The day's work is done. The logs in the fireplace crackle and pop, a warm golden light filling the small room. Outside, an owl hoots in the distance. The family is gathered, the younger children already asleep. An older relative, their face illuminated by the fire, begins a story, a hushed tale of a traveler who got lost in the woods on a night just like this and saw a strange, flickering light among the trees. The story isn't meant to be terrifying, but to create a sense of wonder and mystery, a connection to the unseen world that felt so close in the vast, dark landscape of a new continent. This was the spirit of Halloween in its infancy. A quiet, contemplative, and communal experience, a world away from the boisterous celebration we know today. And so, as the fire burns low and the embers begin to glow, our journey into the colonial night comes to an end. The world outside your window is quiet, and the stories of the past have faded into the peaceful realm of dreams. Let the gentle rhythm of this history lull you into a deep and restorative sleep. Thank you for joining me on this quiet exploration. If you've enjoyed this time together, I invite you to subscribe and join us for our next journey. Until then, sleep well.